August 26, 2020, and I'm calling the meeting of the Mount Pleasant Commercial Design Review Board to order. So this is a virtual meeting and fraught with challenges of dealing with virtual meeting formats and such, but we've done several of these successfully, so bear with us. There's a few things that I'd like to ask folks to do when you're not speaking. Please mute your mics. State your name before all statements. And if you're interested in making a public statement, please follow the direction on the screen. There's a 20-second delay, so we ask that all participants be aware. You'll notice I'm wearing headphones. This helps to cut down on feedback, so it's a good idea if you have earbuds or headphones. It helps cut down on that. So with that, I'm going to introduce the members of the Design Review Board, and the first is Mr. Ian Duncan. If you would please state your name and say present when I call your name.
Ian Duncan is present.
Cameron Swales. Are you here? I don't see him on the list, so apparently Cameron is not here.
Yeah,
Cameron, you just need to unmute.
he's muted. You're still muted.
Cameron, if you are
There you go.
present, say your name and say present.
Unmute. There you go. Oh,
Yeah, it's showing that you're unmuted, Cameron, but unfortunately we are unable to hear you.
you got a volume
I'm not
button?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Present.
Yes, we can.
Yes. State your name and say present, please.
Cameron Swales, present.
Very good. Thank you. I'm Rick Lambert. I'm present. Chris McCarthy.
Chris McCarthy, present.
Ms. Tara Spencer.
Tara Spencer, present.
Mr. William O'Neill.
William O'Neill, President.
And oh, he's been okay. And Mr. Steve Magoon.
Steve Magoon, present.
Okay, all members are present and accounted for. This is great. On the staff side, we have Miss Lynette Lyons.
Present.
Okay. She's the recording secretary, Miss Brittany Johnson,
Yes, Brittany Johnson, present.
and Mr. Peter Stone.
Peter Stone, present.
And these are of the planning department. All right, so for our agenda, we have a number of things that the agenda has been set out, but the first thing is to approve the agenda. So I need a motion and a second to approve the agenda.
I'd like to motion approve the agenda.
Ian Duncan will second the motion.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
that was Steve Magoon making the motion.
All right, and Lynette, would you do a roll call for us? Anything that needs a roll call, please?
I can certainly do that. So
Excellent.
for the vote, we've got Miss Spencer,
Aye.
Mr. Duncan,
Aye.
Mr. Magoon,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Mr. O'Neill,
Aye.
as in nay, as in no.
I'm here.
Oh, we are voting on approval of the agenda. Do you approve the agenda?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Swales,
Aye.
Mr. Lambert,
Aye.
all in favor.
Okay.
Aye.
All right, so the next thing is to approve the minutes from previous meeting. We need a motion and a second to approve the minutes.
Ian
Magoon.
Duncan makes a motion to approve.
Steve Magoon seconds.
All right, for the roll call.
I'm sorry, that was Ian that made the motion.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. All right. And Mr. Swales,
Aye.
Mr. O'Neill,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Mr. Magoon,
Aye.
Mr. Duncan,
Aye.
Ms. Spencer,
Aye.
and Mr. Lambert.
Aye.
All in favor.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is the general public comment. If there's anyone from the public who would like to make a general comment, please state your name for the record. And we have to allow 30 seconds for you to speak up here. So just state your name and make your comment.
I do not have anyone waiting in the lobby.
Okay. All right. So apparently there is no public comment. So the next item on the agenda is general correspondence. Is there any general correspondence that the board should be aware of?
This is Brittany Johnson with staff. There were no general correspondence.
All right. Next item on the agenda is consent motions. Are there any consent motions?
Ian Duncan would like to make a motion of consent to approve item number 1.
Tara Spencer would like to second that.
All right. For the roll call.
One moment. All right. Ms. Spencer,
Aye.
Mr. Duncan,
Aye.
Mr. Magoon,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Mr. O'Neill.
Recuse.
Thank you. Mr. Swales
Aye.
and Mr. Lambert.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion all in favor with Mr. O'Neill abstaining.
All right.
Yes.
For the item number 2 on the agenda is Long Grove office. Now here's how we proceed with this. As I'll open the discussion on this one, we'll have a staff presentation. Then there will be an applicant presentation for 5 minutes maximum. We'll have an opportunity for public comment, then an opportunity for board questions. And then at that point, after the board has finished their questions, we'll close public comment, and then there will be board comments and deliberation, and then finally, the disposition of the request, a motion and a vote. So with this, we'll begin Long Grove office. Staff, please give your presentation.
This is Peter Stone with staff to cover site comments for Long Grove office. A tree survey in chart form showing all trees 8 inches and above will need to be provided. A summary excluding palms showing pre-development and post-development inches meeting 160 inches an acre will need to be more clearly indicated. A crosswalk striping should be provided across both driveways, and one shouldn't be provided to the Harris Teeter Shopping Center. A plant schedule detailing the height, caliper, and quantity of species being planted will need to be provided for the buffer chart and foundation plantings. A single soldier course of Podocarpus along the front of the building will not be sufficient to meet requirements for foundation plantings. This 2-story building will require vegetation with some height to correspond to the elevations. Transplanting some of the sable palms that are proposed to be removed would help achieve this goal. The rerouted underground power should be routed outside of the 12-inch live oak tree protection zone. Indication of outdoor furniture, bike racks, and refuse cans should be detailed and shown on the site plan. There is no proposed location for a dumpster or enclosure on the site plan. Elevations of that enclosure will need to be provided. Staff recommends preliminary approval with comments needing to be addressed.
Architectural comments. The applicant has met with staff. The overall form is compliant with the town's architectural guidelines. However, there are small changes that could be implemented to make the structure more compliant. The building has a distinct basement on top. However, the proportions could be adjusted. Staff suggests that the vertical V-groove siding be lowered in height to align with the windows, and the Nishi-Ha panels be lowered to match. The smaller windows placed on the south elevation seem uncharacteristic and are not in matching the remainder of the design. The metal downspouts are also distracting and should be incorporated into the facade seamlessly. Additionally, the HVAC screening is not in keeping with the overall architectural features. Staff recommends preliminary approval.
All right, thank you. Now we'll have the applicant presentation. Please state your name and name of your firm, and you have 5 minutes for your presentation.
Hello, this is Wentz Chesson, Integrated Building Design. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Jason is the site engineer. He should be joining me. I thought he was going to go first. Jason, are you there? Well, I'll just continue. I think I'm understanding what Brittany's talking about. I'm on the front, kind of the undulating columns that stick a little higher around the windows. I don't know if that's what she's talking about. I'll have to maybe get with her on an email about that. But I'm willing to make changes like that. The gutter downspouts, I did have them on the other side, on the sides of the building, if you will, not facing Long Grove. But I was concerned about the water coming down from the front of the building and then having to go around the corner. I just thought that would be too much for it to do. And the downspouts are kind of nestled into the siding and the brick down at the bottom. Where the brick stops, and so the downspout is inset into the wall there a little bit. That's all I have to say. Jason, are you here? Jason Milner, I think I see a symbol over there. You may be having trouble with sound, but
yeah, I see him. He's tuned in, but I can't hear him.
Okay. I talked to him earlier. We reviewed.
He's going to call in. Comment. He needs the phone number. Okay. I'm going to message him that phone number.
Okay. Well, so this is a small building, 3,000 square foot footprint. And well, I'll talk about the windows on the back too. That's a stairway, so I thought it was somewhat traditional to have the windows kind of follow the flights of the stairs. Well, not traditional might be the wrong word, but acceptable. But they are different in the overall design. I think as an alternative, I could take one of those two windows side by side on the upstairs and put one of those kind of centered on the center of that where the stairs are. The bump out on the roof there is the elevator. Unfortunately, we needed it. It's not really seen by the road, but didn't want to put it in the center of the building because of the small footprint of the building. It takes up too much room. And as you can see from the front, it's right invisible. I think the HVAC screening, I was thinking horizontal deck boards, or it could be the same exact material of the building, which is a polyash siding, similar to, I guess, cementitious siding, but it's made from flash. It's very durable, doesn't rot. That could be a possible material for that screening. I think brick would be too much, too big. There's not enough space for a brick, in my opinion, although I did think about that. I think Jason might be.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you, Jason.
We can hear you.
Okay. I apologize. I could hear everyone. I could not speak for some reason.
Go ahead, Jason. I'm done.
Okay. Yeah, it's really trying to be brief here. I apologize for the technical difficulty there. The project is redevelopment of the, Brittany, if you could go to C100, please. Next page. One more. There we are. As you can see, the project is a redevelopment of a portion of the parking lot next to the old Gilligan's restaurant there in Seaside Farms. I believe as Vince described, it's about a 3,000 square foot footprint building that will be a combination office, small pharmacy. The pharmacy is, I believe, intended to do their own compounding, that sort of thing, with a small drive-through. So the parking lot's going to be reconfigured to accommodate that. We'll also be removing the outer edges of the existing parking lot, which currently goes property line to property line, to install the required buffers along the site. The owner, I'd like to point out, has been in contact with the Windward Point and Seaside Farms HOAs, and has gotten positive response on this. They've expressed interest in having something other than a restaurant use on the site. And in addressing Peter's comments on the site comments, I don't see anything there that we can't work out with staff to accommodate. I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody has on the site. And again, sorry for the technical glitch here.
All right, does that conclude your presentation?
Yes, again, happy to answer any questions.
Okay. At this point, we will open the floor for any public comments. If there are any members of the public who would like to comment, you have up to 3 minutes. If you would please state your name and address, and then go on with your comments.
Mr. Lambert, I have no one waiting in the lobby.
Okay, thank you. We'll take that as there are no public comments. So next, we will ask the board if they have any questions of the applicant. State your name and then we'll state your question.
This is Chris McCarthy. A question for the architect. I think the screening of the HVAC system can be better integrated. Perhaps it's a combination, not just brick, but maybe a combination of brick and screening. Maybe you've got 3 foot wide brick piers, screen, 3 foot wide brick piers, something like that, just to continue. The screening looks like an afterthought. As far as whatever the material is, deck boards, it should not be wood or anything. It's going to have to be something that's durable. And you mentioned the Doral product, but it's out of proportion. I think if you can carry the base foundation material through, it would be more integrated.
Yes, I'll work on that. I think that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I have another comment. If you would consider the base course of brick doesn't really carry the vertical columns through. Had you considered articulating the brick?
I sure have.
Pardon?
Yep. Yeah, I do. I think that's a good idea. I have thought about that. Make a little thicker base of brick.
Yeah, and reveal in between.
Yeah. That would help.
Okay.
Give it a little
That's all my
detail down there. It's so horizontal down there on the bottom. That would give it a little bit more verticality. Mm-hmm. All the way around the building, actually, it'll be.
Yeah, I would say any place you have a vertical.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, this is Rick Lambert. I have a question on the site. So presently it's two-way traffic flow through the parking lot, and it's being changed to one-way traffic flow. And yet the one driveway for the inn is still two-way. So how do you sign this, or how are you going to keep people from going the wrong way in the out?
I'm sorry. So your question is on the new one-way out, how to keep people from entering?
Yeah, there'll be signage there, no entry.
There'll be signage. If you look on the proposed layout geometry, we have indicated actually dual, in that case, stop sign, obviously exiting, and it's do not enter the other way.
Okay, I see this, yes.
So it's signed to prevent that.
Okay, thank you.
This is Tara Spencer. I also have a question about the site layout in regards to the parking count. It looks like a substantial amount of parking is being taken away from the site. Per this building use, have you run into any issues with the calculations of not having enough parking?
No, we meet the parking requirements for the simultaneous uses of the site.
Okay.
There's a calculation.
Got it. Thank you.
Hey, this is Ian Duncan. I have a question. Are the colors in the elevations representative of the actual paint selections?
This is Wentz Chesson, Integrated Building Design. Yes, it's not a rendering. It's rather colors, but it's basically a gray and a white paint, and then the black material is a Nichiha panel, and it's reflective. So it can have blues and greens in it, but it's basically a black.
Yeah, I'm just, my personal comment would be, that the screening, and I know you're going to work on that, but I don't understand why that would not relate to the palette of the building. And B, I just feel like it's extremely dark and honestly a little drab for where we live. I'd like to see it brighten up a hair. If you mentioned that it's actually a shade of white, so maybe it's just coming out gray. But it just seems quite dark for this climate.
This image is a little dark as I'm looking at. I did get a rendering done. It wasn't in time for this presentation, but the rendering looks a lot lighter, and the grays and the whites and the polyash siding is a little too dark here. But again, the black is reflective, so it actually reflects quite a bit of blue sky. So it's
Well, but it'll be underneath the shadow of the eave for the most part. It's an interesting palette, and I'm not trying to tell you what color to paint your building. I think that's up to the client. I do think it looks a little heavy and dark for this particular climate. I see this fitting in Portland, Oregon, just perfectly. That's my comment. Thank you.
okay. I just would say that I'll just wait for the rendering next time if we happen to meet again on this project.
Sure, and like I said, I'm not trying to pick out paint colors for you guys. That's not my job.
Okay. Okay.
All right, any other questions from the board?
I have one. This is Chris McCarthy. I have one more comment. Wentz, I know this is a budgetary item, but had you considered a metal roof on this building?
It's true. It's just a budget. I think with this style roof, hip style, and the building right across the street, I believe, has a asphalt shingle roof, and it's so high up there, it's not too noticeable. I don't know. I mean, I always opt for metal. It's the client that, because it's 2 or 3 times more.
Sure.
And we are using premium materials on the siding, which is where you're looking and where you're walking by.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
Are we still gonna go through for comments, Rick?
When we close this session, then we'll be just deliberating.
Okay, usually we do questions and comments, so I just wanted to check. Then I do have a couple more comments.
Okay.
Sorry. This is Tara Spencer. So for the south elevation windows, I do agree with staff comments. I understand that they are in a stairwell, but I think it would be nice to try to tie that in better with the rest of the facade around the building. So maybe instead of the 3 smaller punched windows, we can do something. You can do something like you were talking about with a bigger window at the top. The front facade, that middle area of storefront, I was wondering and I don't know if there's a restraint with the ceiling height within the building, but I was wondering if that upper storefront could follow the line of the gable and maybe emphasize that architecture there to give it a little bit of a hierarchy, being up at the front.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also do agree with Ian about lightening the building a little bit, but I don't know if this is supposed to be like a red brick, but maybe tying the brick palette in with the lighter colors that you were describing of the siding, maybe like a lighter tan color or something that might work better. Still keep it warm, but work better with the lighter color of the siding. And those are my comments.
All right. So
this is Wentz. Do I have a chance to comment back?
yes, we're still in the. We're actually still in the question period. So.
I agree with that. I was hoping for some feedback about the stairwell. I have an idea how to do that. I know the brick is supposed to be red. A lot of the brick around there is red.
Mm-hmm.
I was just down that Long Grove Road. It's with the exception of Basil, which is that beige kind of tan. I don't know, but I have a severe dislike. I don't like these brown bricks and tan. It's not the Army.
Mm-hmm.
So and red brick, classic. It's hard to go wrong with. I know the color is wrong It's hard to get right in the other colors for me.
Yeah.
But again, hold on for the rendering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even if it's a lighter red, I think that might work better. I guess it's just the way that this might appear.
I was going for a darker red, but I think lighter's definitely good.
Sounds good.
All right. Any other questions from the board? Okay, at this point, we will close public comment and we'll open the floor of the board only to do comments and deliberation. So if you have any comments that you'd like to share between board members, this is your opportunity.
Hey, this is William O'Neill. I was wondering if our architects on the board had any ideas on ways to screen the elevator shaft. It protrudes above the building on the, I guess, south and the west elevation. I'm obviously open to ideas, but I didn't know if there was anything that you've come across in your time to somehow bring it to the best of its ability.
This is Tara Spencer. I think maybe one way that would help screen it a bit better is instead of continuing that vertical material, which I think might emphasize it. Maybe whatever gets decided for the mechanical screen area, maybe tie that material back in so it looks more like a screen. I know that elevator overruns are hard to hide, especially with a building this small and you can't put it in the middle. But I feel like the color of the siding right now and the vertical striation of it is emphasizing it. So maybe just changing up the materiality on that would help hide it a bit better.
This is Chris McCarthy. This is a question for Wentz. Is there any way that elevator could be integrated into a protruding hip or a slight hip tower or something like that? That's a question just for something for you to consider. I do want to talk about all the vertical elements on the building. I think it's a mistake to have vertical cladding on the column items and then have vertical siding in between. I think it would look better if you had horizontal siding in between your columns, or vice versa. There's a little bit too much vertical material on the building.
Yeah, Chris, I agree that would probably look nice to have a horizontal in between the columns. Mm-hmm. I do like the columns being more vertical just because I think it's emphasizing that height, but I agree that it is a lot of vertical at the moment.
Hey, this is Ian Duncan, and I'm a landscape architect, but I've done a few buildings in my time. But I think it's sort of two buildings. On the left, those two elevations I think are successful as a very contemporary building. And then on the right, you sort of have I'm trying to be low country and fuse the two. Does anybody agree with that? I feel like the peak in the middle, honestly, is fighting the rest of it. I feel like the top left elevation is honestly the most successful if you're trying to be contemporary. I don't know. I just feel like it's sort of a bit of a bipolar building, especially with the column proportions in the front gable. Like you were saying, Tara, it's sort of like either react to that pitch or don't. I'm just not sure that thing is working for me.
Yeah, I agree with the gable on the front comment, Ian. I think it definitely has a low country aesthetic there, which the rest of the building, I mean, I don't know if it's completely opposite, but it does look more contemporary on the other sides of the building.
Yeah, and you know what I'm realizing is I think it's the grid, right? The column grid does not match, and that's what's confusing to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if that starts to match on all sides of the building, and either the front is reacted to with the gable and emphasized, or maybe the gable is not the appropriate thing here. I don't know, but yeah, I agree.
Yeah, honestly, to me, the top left elevation is the most successful. It seems like that's what they're going for is, contemporary, low country. I just, the two on the right, to me, seem to have a log cabin proportion with those gigantic columns. Something's not working for me.
This is Chris McCarthy. The elevation with the gable, the columns that are supporting the gable are larger than the corner columns. That's a little bit backwards. The corners should actually be more predominant than the center. So you may want to change the proportions. Thin up the columns that are carrying the gable. It is a very different looking building from different angles.
I do appreciate all of the glass, though. I think that is nice, and I think they've done a good job of not falling into the strip window thing that a lot of office buildings tend to fall into. I think they've done a good job breaking it up with these vertical elements. So I think the glass has been successful around the building, besides the stairwell that we talked about earlier.
Any more discussion from the board? All right, at this point, we will entertain a motion from the board. If anybody has a motion, state your name and state your motion. Try to incorporate some of these comments.
This is Tara Spencer. I motion for preliminary approval.
Ian Duncan will second that.
All right, I think we're ready for a roll call vote. Lynette?
Perfect. Ms. Spencer?
Aye.
Mr. Duncan?
Aye.
Mr. Magoon?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mr. O'Neill? Mr. O'Neill?
I said yes, approved.
Sorry, thank you. Mr. Swales?
Aye.
Mr. Lambert?
Aye.
Motion passed unanimously.
Very good. Next item and final item on the agenda, with the exception of our building height discussion, is Bowman Place, final phase building C, D, and E. So, staff, would you make your presentation?
This is Peter Stone with staff presenting site comments for Bowman Place Final Phase Building C, D, and E. Parallel parking along the main drive aisle was approved with the DRB master plan and will be required to be installed. The proposal to plant predominantly bosque elm will not be permitted. Chinese elm has shown to have invasive tendencies. Furthermore, 50% of the planted canopy trees must be native species. Pittosporum should be substituted on the plant schedule for a shrub that is not as dated and overused. Further research will need to be done on the pedestrian walkways in the tree protection zones. A less invasive material other than concrete will need to be provided. Chapter 1 through 6, 318, 7B, front yard, street trees are required. The 3 canopy trees of a minimum 4-inch caliper shall be required for each 100 linear feet of road frontage, using species such as southern red oak, live oak, willow oak, elm, and American beech. Such tree types to be consistent with each block and evenly spaced, with exceptions made for curb cuts, utilities, and other obstructions. Staff recommends preliminary approval with comments needing to be addressed.
Architectural comments. The applicant has met with staff. The proposed structure is in keeping with the prior DRB approved in buildings A and B. The proposed buildings foster cohesion with the use of board and batten, brick, and metal canopies. The vertical spacing on the board and batten seems narrow in the rendering and conveys more like painted corrugated. Staff suggested the spacing be studied. Additionally, the east elevation addressing Old Georgetown should be investigated. Consider adding double doors or another storefront glass panel beside each door. The large brick areas between the door groupings make the facade feel secondary. Staff recommends preliminary approval. You're muted.
Okay, there we go. At this point, we will open the floor for the applicant to make their presentation. You have 5 minutes. Please state your name and the name of your firm.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
My name is Kyle Hoyt with Hoyt Rini. I'm the civil engineer. I'll go ahead and kind of give an introduction on the project and the site, and then turn it over to Lossie Knight, our architect, who is also on this call. If we could go to page 3 of the PDF submittal, that's probably in Bowman Place, the final phases here, building C, D, and E are located in the middle of a series of tracks that run between Bowman Road and Highway 17, right behind Dixon Nordstrom. So this development is integrated with the neighboring shopping center and is an extension of Building A and B, which were submitted, reviewed, and approved by the DRB back in 2018. Building A at the corner of Bowman Road and Old Georgetown Road, that construction has commenced. We were never able to finish permitting of Building B due to the on-street parking. So one of the comments that we would like to go into some detail about on this call is the challenges and roadblocks associated with putting on-street parking, which is why it has been removed. The whole feel of the site, it kind of naturally lays itself out. If anybody's driven by the site, what you'll notice is some exceptional historic trees. Our layout, building placement, everything is, it's not a deep site. We're kind of restricted in that manner, but the flow and feel, it's all driven by the existing trees that are out on site. Building C, Building B, and Building E follow the same program, with the bookends being Building A and Building B. The primary view for this development, you'll notice if you drive by Bowman Road, it's not really Old Georgetown Road. You drive by Bowman Road, there's actually a great view from Bowman Road facing the parking lot side of the building, which is why we are showing, we moved the dumpster pad. Building A proposed a dumpster pad that really kind of impacted that view. So as part of this project, we are moving the Building A dumpster pad to the adjoining property. And specifically, regarding staff's comments, most things are easy to address. We're happy to work out any species changes. Street trees are somewhat challenging. What we don't see on this sheet is the gas line, the gravity sewer line. There's also a sewer force main line between the right-of-way line and Old Georgetown Road, which kind of presents some challenges with planting some trees in close proximity, but we can accommodate the street trees. We are happy to look at some additional materials for pavers. I'm anticipating that the pedestrian walkways that are being referred to are related to Building D. Again, flexibility in the right-of-way. It's a DOT roadway. In permitting pavers just may not be feasible in Old Georgetown Road, but we're happy to navigate that process with DOT and staff. The on-street parking, Building B was never completed. We worked with DRB there was previously a loft hotel proposed across the street. Old Georgetown Road, it's not a primary corridor, it's not a boulevard. There was no streetscape design really specified for Old Georgetown Road, nor does it really warrant it. It's kind of, it's a mix of county and town properties. The loft hotel has since fallen through, and specifically related to the on-street parking, DOT will not permit that on-street parking. It provides conflicts with site distance. They will not allow it. That is why we were never able to permit Building B. The only solution would be for the town of Mount Pleasant to take over the road, which was not an option 2 years ago. We've reached out to James and Brad in transportation, but that is just not feasible. So that's kind of an overview of the site. I'd like to give it over to Lossie so he has some time to cover the architecture, and I'm happy to answer any questions when appropriate.
Good evening, guys. I just want to make sure everybody can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you, Lossie. Thanks.
Yep.
Okay. Brittany, will I be able to actually roll through the slides, or will you be doing that?
Lossie, you can ask to take control of the screen, and I can grant that.
Okay.
Yeah, Peter's been driving this whole time. No one's been aware, so yeah.
Okay. All right. I just made the screen share request. Does that work? Oh, you know what? I'll tell you what, Peter, if it's okay with you, I'll let you drive. I'm having a technical difficulty I see here. So if we could scroll forward till we get to the architectural. There we go. So this is just a little bit of context along Old Georgetown Road, and Building A was previously approved, and you can see the facade up top. And really, the reason I wanted to kind of point this out is you can see these really great, nice, grand trees that kind of make up the site along Georgetown. So as Kyle indicated, this was really one of the guiding factors that allowed us to kind of figure out site positioning and how we can get these buildings that kind of nestle up around these trees and to preserve those trees. Next image, please. And so I think we all know the context along Old Georgetown Road. We do have several warehouse type buildings. There's a new real estate office, which is also a nice looking building, but it feels a bit more of a secondary street, and we feel like we want to kind of tap into the energy of the Bowman Place shopping center, which is where we have more of our activity kind of on that west side of the building. Next slide, please. All right, we can keep, in the interest of time, we can kind of jump ahead a few more here. Okay, so this is one of the better slides. At the bottom of the page, I'm sorry, we can back up just one moment. At the bottom of the page, you can see the Bowman Place Shopping Center there, and then you'll see a little red flag there. So there's a new restaurant going in there, a new canopy, and then just to the right, that's where Building A is currently under construction. So we really feel like, as Kyle said, this is our real view corridor. This is where we feel like we wanted to kind of have the focus and where we believe the true visibility to our commercial and retail tenants is going to be. So perhaps, Peter, we could skip ahead to some of the enlarged renderings. While we're doing that, I'll just share that we've tucked in between the buildings, for the most part, mechanical systems and also electrical panels. We've really tried to embrace this idea of this sort of landscape plaza that happens right in front of Building D, and it gives a really nice jog to the buildings to kind of break it up along the streetscape. If we can go to the next slide, please. So that's some sense of how that plaza might work. And then along Georgetown Road, we have sort of canopies that kind of happen at intervals, which is different than on the parking lot side, where we have a little bit more continuity in connecting these retail spaces. Next slide, please. So this would be one of our typical entries from the parking lot side. Next slide. And we can go to the next slide. So I'll go ahead and jump ahead to the exterior materials palette. Our colors are fairly consistent with what you have on Building A. We felt like that was appropriate here. A lot of what you see up and down Georgetown Road has a lot of inconsistencies and a lot of different language going on. So we liked that we had some consistency here. On the next one or two pages, you'll see that we wanted to try to expose some of the building structure, which is why you see these wide flange columns and brackets that come out. Let's see if we can get to the next couple ones here. So we have a lighter brick that kind of helps to provide bookends and sort of anchor points for the building. And then if we go a little bit further, Peter, you'll see that on the underside of the canopy, maybe we're really trying to warm up the whole entire experience by having this sort of tigerwood soffit that sort of is sort of the umbrella over each of the buildings. And also, we've sort of carefully studied the oak tree canopies and how we're working around these trees. And that was one of the reasons why we tried to keep the buildings in a little bit lower scale, to make sure we could nestle up and work with those trees. And I think this gives you a good preview of the exterior palette. So far as the staff comments, I do agree with the comment that the board and batten felt like it was shown a little bit tight, maybe kind of red like corrugated metal. So we're currently showing it at 8 inches on center. It feels like that's an easy solution to sort of widen that and bring it back into a more of a board and batten feel, so it's no confusion. And then along Georgetown Road, as Kyle mentioned, we feel like we're not going to be able to really do the parking based on the feedback from DOT. And we really, again, feel like we want to relate more to the Bowman Shopping Center. That's where the activity is. That's where the visibility is. So we do have a fair amount of glass actually on the Georgetown side. If you look at it in the plan view, tenant by tenant, roughly 50 to 60% of the tenant space has glazing that faces Georgetown. And so given that we won't have a lot of parking, we felt like we would keep, for instance, the double doors on the active side of the parking lot versus Georgetown. So that's really my part of the presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Rick, I believe you're muted.
Okay, here we go. I have a question. Now we're getting some feedback from somebody. So anyway, my question is on this particular elevation, when I see in the where the doors are, and there's a vertical and a horizontal element supporting a low roof overhang, but on the right and left sides of that, well, there's a bracket, or there's a wide flange beam coming out, but there's no vertical. And I'm just trying to sort of figure out what looks appropriate there, because it looks like there's a column and a horizontal wide flange that create a support that looks proper structurally. But then when I look at the other ones coming out, there's no column underneath of it. So, and then the one right in the middle, the column doesn't go all the way up to the underside of the upper roof like it does on the corner. Are you following me? I wish I could point, but I can't do that on here. So
yeah, I'll follow you. I follow you.
Okay. So I'm just trying to, if we're trying to reveal structure and something that looks right, then we have some inconsistencies.
Well, I'll tell you, the intent is we were trying to look at the facade really from different distances. So if you really step back from the building, you can see that the overall length and massing is broken up into 3 bays, as you mentioned. So we have these vertical wide flange columns that occur at the brick pilasters.
Right.
And then as you approach the building, the way that we really would experience the building is along the sidewalk space and not necessarily sort of a mathematical view. So we felt like it was appropriate to add some of these smaller sort of intermittent columns that gives an anchor point, sort of that central anchor point for these canopies over the entry doors. I do see the argument that it has a little bit of asymmetry. For us, that was something that we sort of thought made it kind of different and exciting. Peter, do you mind going back just 1 or 2 slides? We have an enlarged facade that might be better. Let's see if we can go back just 1 or 2. Yeah, that one there. So yeah, 1 more ahead, sorry. Yeah, just 1 more forward, please. 1 more, sorry. Yeah, just advance 1 more, please. Yeah. Are we able to go 1 more page, Peter?
Yeah, if you can do to page numbers, that'd be helpful, but 35 is good for you?
Yeah, I apologize. I think it's page 33, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess what we're trying to share is we intentionally have some asymmetry here, and we are sort of playing a game where these brick facades sort of merge in and out of the face of the building, rather than trying to create, you know, sort of a flat plane and some uniformity. So it was intentional, but I guess I understand too that it could be looked at as, you know, having some variation in it that maybe isn't as consistent as it could be for more traditional architecture.
Any other questions?
So this is Ian Duncan. I have a question. I guess we're going to call that a portico. Is that actually going to catch any rain, or is that just for effect? You know what I mean? It's underneath the eaves.
Yeah, great question. So the upper overhanging roof line cantilevers out about 8 feet. And then the lower roof line, we feel like just sort of helps to scale down the space when you're entering into the storefronts. And so those are right around 9'6", and we feel like that was going to give some rain protection at the door in case you get a driving rain. But also, we're really trying to set the building up so that we don't know what tenant's going to be there, whether it's going to be one tenant or 6 tenants. So we wanted to leave the area above those canopies clear for signage. And then on top of those lower canopies, we actually have uplights that will wash up the wall and also illuminate the tiger wood soffit to kind of give sort of a floating type effect to the primary roof line.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I quite like it. I wonder if that structure continues through the building, but I'm guessing those beams don't continue through at that height. But I'm quite fond of this. Honestly, this is sort of what I was looking for from our last applicant as far as the color palette.
This is Tara Spencer. So I agree with Ian. I really do like the aesthetic of this building. I think it's really nice how you've broken down the scale of the facade from a perspective from like an overall site and then down to the pedestrian scale as you enter each of these spaces. On the east facade, which is I think what the staff comments were, I do think that the brick spacing between the doors of each tenant is a little bit wide, and either, yeah, I think it's the east.
Page 37.
Okay, thanks, Brittany. Yeah, so I think I agree with them about a lot of brick being in between the doors, so I don't know if we could shift the doors or maybe just add like a side light towards each other, just to make the door, I guess, balance out the brick there, because it just feels a little bit heavy in between. I don't think you have to go to the full double door, but I think it would be nice to just make that area a little bit smaller. And then, what was your intent on this side for the canopies that are over the door? Because I feel like they're pretty high up. Is that correct? Oh, hold on, sorry, you're muted.
Lassie, you're muted.
There you go, guys. Is that better?
Mm-hmm.
Is that working?
Yep.
Okay. So this is the low sloping side of the building. And we go down to about 13'6" on the lower side. So we just wanted to give it some scale that was similar to the other side of the building. So we popped back up to about 15'6". And then again, we really feel like, you know, there's not parking. There's not going to be a ton of activity on Georgetown Road. Not that we don't want to offer the option for people to walk through there and experience it, but nothing compared to what's going to be on the shopping center side. So we felt like the intermitting canopies rather than the continuous ones that you see on the other side of the building might be more appropriate, because you really leave these tenant spaces and you sort of walk out towards the green space or towards Georgetown Road. And I agree about the side lights. I think we could probably add a side light and, kind of reproportion where that brick is.
Is the main soffit of like the main roof structure, is that still 8 feet deep on this side, or does it get more narrow on this side?
Yeah, it does get reduced down to 3 foot 6 inches.
Okay.
And then that primary canopy above extends back out and is very similar to the other facade, so it's closer to 8 feet.
Okay. And then if we could just go one more to see the other side of the building. Maybe it was one back. Sorry. Yeah, that one. I think also, as you explained, with breaking down the scale to the pedestrian level as you enter, maybe, I can't tell from this rendering, but maybe the wide flange size also gets scaled down at that level. I think right now they're both the same, which I really like the exposed structure, and I think that looks great. But I just don't want it to look too heavy at that lower scale. So maybe if those steel elements are just a little bit smaller, just to try to keep with what you were doing and balance that out.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We could scale that down accordingly.
And that's all of my comments.
Lassie, this is Chris McCarthy. You have to pardon me because I grew up on Long Island in the 60s, and we had strip malls, and anytime I see a long, low roof unbroken, makes me cringe. I like what you've done with the canopies on the west side. Is there any way you can, or do you want to talk about any way to break this roof line on the Georgetown side? I know this side is really not going to get much traffic. You have no parking over there, but it's kind of a long, low, monotonous roof line.
Lassie, you need to unmute.
There we go. Okay, I think it's important to probably look at it in the larger context as well. Peter, I'm sorry, I don't have my page numbers keyed in here, but if we go back to some of the earlier renderings, you'll see that, remember, this side is really going to be covered by these large oaks. We have some really great, limbs and canopies and such. So I think when you look down the street, the buildings have some consistency, but then we're stepping them in and out. And even if you go back one or two further, Peter, I think we have some good bird's eyes that are going to probably even show it better. I think with the building stepping in and out for buildings like Building D, for instance, I think that's going to really create this great landscape plaza in the front. And then the trees themselves are varying sizes and varying canopies. So I think just that alone, it's going to kind of mute and crop the way we see the buildings. So anyways, that was the design intent.
That's fair.
Mm-hmm.
All right, any other?
Hey, this is. Yeah, if everybody could go on mute, this is William. I have a few comments.
Okay.
I guess Old Georgetown, I believe, is the front of the building. While you won't be parking on that side of the building, I do think that it is important that that be addressed accordingly. I think the Bowman Place side of the property is the back of an old Kmart after you get past Building A. So buildings C, D, and E are addressing the rear loading docks. And I respectfully disagree with Lassie on that being the area to celebrate. And I think we have opportunities for outdoor spaces between the buildings that are kind of being missed because mechanical units are being placed there. If you look at building A, there was kind of a lot of hardscape around it. And the point was to bring people outside. You know, we're in the middle of a global pandemic, and whether you host a meeting with an employee outside or have lunch outside, I think celebrating outdoor spaces is really important now and in the future. So my comment would be that we need to rethink the area between the buildings and see if there's any opportunities to shift or move mechanical units and create opportunities between the buildings, kind of like we created along Bowman with Building A. The other thing I can't really tell is there some symmetry between what Rush Dixon did at A and Lossy? Maybe I'll just go through my whole thing and you can comment after the end. Is I want to make sure we have some sort of symmetry and color palette between A through B, whatever, C, D, E. They have to somehow talk together in some way. So I'd love to talk about that for a second. You know, are we going to a completely different type of brick? Is the color palette completely different? I think that's really important. And I think our architects in the group should be hitting home on that. I'm not saying they have to be identical, but I do think that they can't all be different. I like the roof with I'm going to call it the Tiger Woods wood bottom, and I think it's very attractive. I think it's more attractive on the Bowman side and less attractive on the Georgetown side, where there's a step, there's some sort of roof, there's a raised roof element. I don't like that as much, particularly. That's a personal opinion, but I do think that, yes, that's a good picture right there that Peter or Brittany has up. Or Georgetown, I'm not a huge fan of the raised roof elements, but I do like the Tiger Wood, the wood bottom. I love the brick choice. It's kind of whitewash look to it. I like the gray slate color. I just want to make sure all these buildings are talking together. I want to take advantage of outdoor opportunities between buildings. I think we have to, whether we're fighting a battle of on-street parking or not, which I've kind of heard loud and clear through this presentation, I guess the town's pushing you to have on-street parking, which the comment from Kyle and Lossy is correct. I mean, it's a DOT right away, but we've been successful with them to get the town of Mount Pleasant to sign documents that will allow basically town is responsible for maintenance. But if that's not the case in this particular area, then we understand. But man, it would be really cool to have on-street parking on Old Georgetown, have outdoor spaces, and really create something unique here between the buildings and in front of them. Because I can tell you, people are going to be less likely to hang out behind Dick's Sporting Goods loading dock. That's generally my comments. And then my last kind of question is, so I've noticed that the Building A pad is kind of cleared, but that's not under construction. Is there some sort of schedule or sequence we can be given as it relates to this build out? So that's all I have, and I'll put my microphone on mute.
William, this is mm-hmm.
I was just going to ask if you had any responses to that. We're still in the question period. So.
Yes, this is Lossy. William, I think you bring up some good points about these buildings speaking together, and I believe it's on page 16 of the submittal. We have a picture of Building A, and we have really tried to kind of be in keeping with the color palette. So we're proposing this same peppercorn gray tone. We have the same brick, which is a Magnolia Bay, that same lighter brick. We have the same board and batten. So our building form is different, but our material palette is very similar, which I think will help to kind of tie things together, like you're saying. we're all about defining these outdoor spaces and areas, for people to enjoy this Oak Tree Plaza that we have. I think this is going to be one of the most unique projects or spaces in Mount Pleasant. And, so I think just carefully having benches and landscape areas is going to really make that work. We've got interconnectivity from the parking lot side, around buildings, around building D on each side, to try to make that happen. And, as far as the mechanical unit location, I guess we're open to potentially shifting it, but we just wanted to preserve that Oak Tree Plaza right at building D and sort of get those units kind of stuffed in those alleyways. But if somebody has some suggestions on those, we could try to shift it, perhaps justify it to one side or the other. But I feel like right now we really are trying to provide these outdoor spaces. And even on the front of the building, you see a lot of retail where you only have 5 or 6 feet of sidewalk space. Well, in some cases, we've got 14 feet between the face of the building and where the car's parking. We also have some nice landscape against the building to break it up. So I feel like even though our building form is different, you're going to feel some consistencies with building A.
Hi, this is Kyle Hoyt. I'd like to add to what Lawson said, and maybe really try to address your comments in a little bit more detail. One, just right off the bat, I don't have a timeline. Building A, we can look into that and be prepared to see when that might come online. Building A does come with, it had a public park. I don't think necessarily building A, the design intent was to create the public spaces. That corner where Bowman and Georgetown meet is kind of an interesting place, and within the, and you can just go to page 3 of the PDF, that's the overall. That corner is unique, and we're within the health and wellness overlay here. I mean, it's just the things are meant to front on Bowman Road, Old Georgetown Road in the ordinance and in the planning and everything. That's kind of an afterthought. Across the street, it's a mix of properties. Matt O'Neill Real Estate just redid theirs on each side. There's smaller county properties and the Aloft Hotel. I think maybe the place, like Lossie is saying, to probably take advantage of and improve this kind of piggybacks off of staff's comments for some different types of materials for pedestrian ways under the trees. But maybe that is the common area that we kind of foresee, and opportunity for some open space, right there in the middle, between C and E. The on-street parking, I am familiar with scenarios where the town will actually apply for the on-street parking. This scenario is a little different, where the on-street parking was intended to go almost along all of Old Georgetown Road, and that on-street parking will not meet site distance requirements from each side. So we have site distance requirements from the entry on the left where building A is, and site distance requirements from the driveway on the right where building B. And if you go in each direction, you just can't get really any on-street parking. And for that reason, DOT confirmed this to me this morning, that they still feel the same way. I'm waiting for James and Brad to confirm their position at town transportation. But unless the town of Mount Pleasant actually takes ownership of the road, DOT will not allow that on-street parking.
All right. Do any of the board members have any further questions? All right, at this point, we will close public comment, and we'll have an opportunity for board comments and deliberation amongst the board. Anybody have any comments to make?
Hey, this is Ian Duncan. I will say I am extraordinarily thankful that these guys looked at the site, preserved the trees, reacted, kept it low impact, and are looking towards a progressive plan. I think it's fantastic use for that site. I'm very excited to see this happen. I also agree with O'Neill, and the loading docks of Dick's is not necessarily, an active space and doesn't truly connect to that shopping center. So it's almost worth considering flipping the entire site plan. And I also think on-street parking and having Mount Pleasant acquire that street is critical to have active streetscapes and active storefronts. That's where we need to go. We need to have bike connectivity with Mount Pleasant Way. We need to get integrated with the city, and those are my comments. But I love this presentation. I think it's quality architecture. I think it's quality design. I love you guys respected the site, and I fully support the project. But I also think we hopefully can engage in a little more meaningful way with the neighborhood and Old Georgetown.
Yeah, this is Rick Lambert. It's my comments. I think, I agree with you that the back end of the old Kmart doesn't look very attractive, but I think they've called attention to the opposite side as the front, and the way that you approach the site, I think you're going to be seeing that front much more prominently than you would, say, coming from the other direction. But the other side of Georgetown Highway isn't very attractive looking either. So, trying to create, something beautiful on that side, I think that it looks good the way that the site is laid out personally. So that's my thoughts.
This is Tara Spencer. One more comment from me. I do agree with Ian and Rick. I think that the presentation of this project was really presented well. I think I also agree about making an effort to save a lot of the historic trees on the property. I think that that's great. But I do also agree with William. Maybe more trees could be added on that side of the site in the landscaping areas between the parking that is planned and the back drive behind the Bowman Place shops. If more trees could maybe screen that area, maybe that's a solution to kind of hide, the ugly spaces that no one wants to look at, like the loading docks. So that might also be something worth looking into. But great job overall.
This is Chris McCarthy. Overall, I think it's a good solution. I do concur that the back of the Nordstrom shoes and so forth is sort of an ugly building. Maybe there's some sort of screening that could happen. The space between the buildings, I think Ian brings up a good point. If we can create some sort of a public space or public avenue back towards Georgetown Road to enjoy the trees and so forth. The buildings look sort of tight together. Just as a thought, perhaps the mechanical equipment could be recessed into the building so that the wall of the building appears to continue. That plaza in between the buildings might be a little wider. I would say you need at least 12 feet paved to create a comfortable space to get back. Other than that, I think it's a good looking building. Those are my comments.
All right, anybody else on the board have any comments or deliberation?
Yeah, this is William O'Neill. I would concur with everyone's thoughts around saving the grand trees and articulating the buildings and the parking so that they were able to preserve those. So kudos. I think it is an attractive building. I think that, some thought should be put into how Old Georgetown is addressed. The low side of the roof is on Georgetown. The high side of the roof is on the retail side. I don't know if you can 180 that. Old Georgetown's going through redevelopment, as mentioned. So that whole area, properties are kind of going through redevelopment. I don't know if the most attractive side, which I would consider the high side of the building, is on the parking lot side, and the back side of a loading dock. I would think it'd be Old Georgetown, where the massive, beautiful live oaks are, and the people enter the property for the most part. I still want to just hit home about looking at outdoor spaces, maybe some getting a landscape architect involved to look at what our opportunities are around these live oaks and in between buildings to create courtyard opportunities. Thinking about the mechanical units, they're stacked up on both sides between the buildings. Is that just an HVAC breezeway through there, or is there an opportunity to create something really cool and unique, or snug something around these live oaks on the front side of the buildings? But again, great job with working around all these live oaks. Building, I think, needs a few tweaks, but overall, it's an attractive building. I appreciate Lossie touching on how the material palettes continue through the property after building A. That's really all.
All right, any other board comments or deliberation? All right, at this point, we will entertain a motion from somebody on the board.
Ian Duncan makes the motion to approve.
Tara Spencer seconds that.
All right, Lynette, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Certainly. Mr. Swales.
Cameron was having connectivity issues, so he is not on right now.
Okay, Mr. Swales abstains. Mr. O'Neill?
Well, I really don't know if I'm ready to vote yet, because are we approving this with board and staff comments being addressed, or are we just approving this as is here in front of us? I think that if they come back with the exact same thing, there could be, some challenge. So I would say approve with board and staff comments being addressed.
That would be
my one modification.
We would have to ask the one that made the motion to amend their motion.
So we're in the middle of a vote, so the motion is to approve the request.
All right, Ian Duncan will amend his motion to approve to...
Mr. Duncan, we're in the middle of a vote, so we need to vote on the motion that is presented.
Right on.
And then we can move forward from there.
I'm a no vote.
Thank you. Mr. O'Neill votes no. Mr. McCarthy?
McCarthy votes no.
Mr. Magoon?
Oh, I think Mr. Magoon left. He had to leave early.
Can Ian Duncan withdraw his motion?
We're in the middle of a vote, so no, you cannot withdraw. Mr. Duncan, are you in favor or against the motion?
I'll also vote against my own motion.
That's fine. Ms. Spencer?
Can I just abstain, I guess, from this motion and wait for the next one?
And Mr. Lambert?
No.
Mr. Lambert votes no. Motion fails on a 4-1 vote with 2 abstentions.
Okay, we will entertain another motion.
I would like to make a new motion to approve with staff comments.
And Tara Spencer will second that.
All right, roll call vote.
Okay. And let's see. Ms. Spencer?
Aye.
Mr. Duncan?
Aye.
Mr. Magoon is absent. Mr. McCarthy?
Chris McCarthy, aye.
Mr. O'Neill?
Aye.
Mr. Swales is not. Mr. Swales is abstaining, and Mr. Lambert?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes 5, all in favor with 1 abstention.
All right, so that concludes our business for tonight, except now we have a session on building heights, and I'm going to suggest that we take a 10-minute break. Do we need a motion for that?
I motion we make it a 5-minute break and power through.
Okay.
I second that.
All right. All right. Let's do a roll call vote.
Yes, William O'Neill votes for a 5-minute break to return at 6:45.
Lambert votes yes.
Duncan votes yes.
All right.
Spencer votes yes.
All right. All right. Come back at 6:46. 5-minute break. Okay.
All right, thanks, Rick.
Okay.
All right, you may proceed.
Okay, so we have concluded the business at hand, and now this is a session to talk about building height. And who's running this part of the presentation?
So, Mr. Lambert, I think Mr. O'Neill had a comment.
Okay, yes, Mr. O'Neill, go ahead.
On the last vote we had, and Ian corrected his motion, I just wanted to mention that I was thinking that they would address board and staff comments, but we said staff comments and all voted yes. But I felt like a lot of the board members had really good comments, and so by excluding that from our preliminary DRB voting, I just feel like it sends a message to the applicant that they only need to address staff comments and that everything that we said didn't really matter because that wasn't part of the vote. So just wanted to mention that.
Yes, and I believe that the vote on the Long Grove office, we just voted to approve, but we didn't say approve with staff comments. And we do need to be very careful when we make motions that we, if the staff is recommending that we approve with staff comments, that we say that in the motion, and also if we want them to include board comments, that needs to be put in the form of a motion. So
can I ask a question real quick? This is Tara Spencer. I think this was at like the May meeting, or I don't know, it was earlier in the year, but I had motioned for approval with comments.
Yes.
And was told that it just had to be approval. So I'm kind of confused. I guess, I don't know if Brittany or somebody could answer this. I'm confused as to what the language needs to be if we are trying to get board and staff comments to be taken for the next submission and for approval. What do we need to say to make sure that all of that's included?
Okay, yeah, this is Brittany. So it's definitely best that you all do with board and staff comments. Well, right now we're doing the development review team, which is our internal staff meeting. And Peter and I will represent DRB at the internal staff meeting tomorrow. And so we will have the opportunity to incorporate the comments that you all have provided in their written comments. So it will be incorporated into the overall staff comments that will be delivered. So we have the opportunity to take everything you all have given feedback-wise and make sure that that is delivered to the applicant on the record. So
thank you, Brittany.
Definitely should, yeah.
Also, Mr. Lambert, this is Lynette.
Yes.
And we can definitely clarify it with our legal counsel, but typically the more specific, the better. So while saying staff and board comments, there are times where those board comments conflict with each other. So it's always better to be as specific with the motion as possible.
Yes. And now if we say that we want them to incorporate board comments, then do they get a copy of the transcript of the meeting?
The minutes of the meeting do not include those comments written out.
Oh.
It does include the recording of the meeting that of course would include all of those comments in audio, but they are not typed out.
Okay. Well, they would, if we expect them to incorporate that into their next submittal, we would need to make sure that they get that and that we're reminded of it too when we meet the next time, so that we don't forget it.
This is Chris McCarthy. Brittany, are you taking notes? So, for instance, I said that they should articulate the columns on the Long Grove. Are you taking notes and are going to pass those along to the?
Yeah, you can pass them along to the applicant.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Hey, this is William O'Neill. Is Peter still on this call?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. Peter, are you going to be in the DRT?
Yes, I'll be there tomorrow. I'm there every week. I actually run the Teams meeting for it. So, but I agree with you. I mean, I'll be sharing. You know, they need to be studying the primary street and things like that. But those are all things I would share in my comments as well with the DRT team.
Okay, all right, yeah, and the reason, you know, I wasn't saying that Brittany, you wouldn't be a good conduit to share that information. I just knew that, you know, Peter was on the site side, so, you know, if you don't necessarily think that there should be more outdoor gathering areas or anything like that, then you can express that came from a few board members. But obviously, if you agree with that, then you can express it came from you. I'm not telling you I don't want to tell you how to represent yourself, but I felt like there was a few board members, including Ian, who thought that, you know, some outdoor opportunities could be taken advantage of specifically for these sites.
No, for sure. And actually, the way the development review team works is that this board actually, in essence, has a seat at that table when we are having that meeting. So you all are represented at that meeting. And, you know, whether I agree with those comments or not, they are represented. But in this case, I mean, I definitely do. This is will be something that'd be very, very beneficial for this development to have the more outdoor seating and, you know, just to study the primary street and things like that. So, yeah.
All right. Hey, this is Ian. I just want to clear this up real quick. So if we're going to make a motion in future, we want to say including staff comments and then including agreed upon board comments, or what would be the language for that?
It would be more so including staff comments if you want to identify certain staff comments, and you can say, and the comment regarding studying of outdoor spaces, you know, HVAC locations, and you can be more specific. You can basically itemize some of those things. Some of them will be a little bit more general, and some of them will be depending on the case. But you definitely want to itemize a little bit more if you can.
Okay.
Yeah, Brian Worst was always good about itemizing. So we'll have to.
Yeah, you just pick the comments you agree with and make that motion. I got you. I know Worst.
All right.
All right. Okay, are we on to building height discussion now?
Yes. And so Peter will be controlling the PowerPoint, but I will be doing all of the explanation here. So it's really kind of informal. We really want to get your feedback on a couple of items. First, we just amended the height map. So I was just going to kind of show you all the differences, what we're using now versus what we were using previously, and then a couple of items from that. And then we wanted to just conclude with building height. We've been looking at, you know, how do you want to measure? Should it be by story or should it be by overall height in feet? And so that's what we want to discuss kind of at the end, just very informal. Pros and cons, what is your preference? What have you seen used in the in other municipalities, or what are some benefits for either? So the first map here shows the old height map, and this one isn't the long-standing height map. This one was adopted on February 11th, 2020, and so this is the previous one, but just some differences here. So you can see the in the upper right-hand corner up there, that's the Johnny Dobbs Health and Wellness Economic Development up by Von Kolnitz. That's at 80 feet previously, and then you're coming closer to Bowman, which is 55. Crossing over Highway 17, it's more 45, and then Chuck Valley, it's at the 40. And then going back to the teal, so that larger section that is the Johnny Dobbs Neighborhood Commercial and Office District, that's at 50, limited to 40 when you're within 50 feet of residential. And then going closer here on the other side, getting closer to the office and to Northcutt, and that's here, and the waterfront gateway street you're going up. So this is the previous map. If you can go to the next slide, Peter. So this is the new height map. So we have a little bit of crossover. So we're still at 80 feet up by Von Konitz, and then we're at 60 feet, which is moving down from 65, which is on the north side of Highway 17. So it's now at 60, and we were previously at 45 on the south side of 17 there. We're at 60 in the blue on both sides there. You're at 50 by Stuart Engel and Chuck Dolly, and moving closer down Chuck Dolly, you're at 40. Again, the larger green section there has stayed at 55 with you are limited to 40 feet within 50 feet of residential, however. And then we are at the 65, which is the old Miller Cadillac site, and right there by Mathis Ferry. In 17. And then Houston Northcutt, you're at 60 feet, which was previously 55, so we've gained about 5 feet there. And then also we gained another 5 feet more towards the water rate, where we're at 70 as opposed to 65. So there are a couple of items that were footnotes in this section. One that I mentioned, you're within 50 feet of an abutting residential area outside the overlay or abutting a street that is adjacent to residential lead zone property outside the overlay, then you're reducing from 55 to 40. And then we're also, Peter, if you can go to the next slide here. And also we have implemented something new here, which is a step back setback. Oh, isn't that fun? So we have the building requirement here. So we're looking, if you're adjacent to the primary road frontage, you can, you have a 3-story, 3 stories would be the maximum. But if you exceed the 3 stories, then you have to do a 2-to-1 step back. So you see here, the first 3 stories are 10 feet each. Okay, so that's very conservative there. So you're at 30 feet, but you have 55 feet to work with, but you've done the 3 stories maximum. If you would like to exceed the 3 stories that are allowed and fulfill the rest of the allotted height measurement up to the 55, then you would have to step back. So the 4th floor there in the bright green has been recessed 24 feet from the primary road frontage so that you can go up 12 feet. So 24 and 12, so that's double. And then you go up again another 30 feet to fulfill the 50-foot height. Then you would step back 26 feet to get the 13. So it's a 2-to-1 ratio there. So that's something that we have just implemented. I know, did you all have any kind of questions about that before we kind of move forward?
I sort of, yeah, I'm just stepping back. I sort of follow where you're going with it, but what is the stated objective for even having a height limit? What is the objective? What are the goals? That sort of thing. It would just be nice to hear an explanation of that.
Yeah, so the height limitation, that's something that has been discussed by council, and they were really saying that some of the heights were a little bit taller than we wanted. We want to keep it more rural, commercial, and bring those heights down, really help us keep that aesthetic. It's not something, I mean, that's something that, you know, you're never going to have everyone agree on the issue, but that's something that council felt very strongly about, is making sure that we're not going too tall. We don't want to be in competition with these, you know, sort of larger looking cities. We want to make sure we keep that kind of coastal vernacular.
Okay, so what I've heard is satisfying council, and that's important. And I heard about to keep a coastal aesthetic, which I understand that too. So you want to have that small town look. You don't want to look like a large urban area. Okay, so I follow that. So that was good. Thank you. That answers my question.
Hey, Brittany, this is Tara.
Yeah.
I just have a quick question. Was there any conversation about switching to stories versus height? The only reason I ask is because I know with downtown Charleston, they recently did switch to stories, and that was because a lot of their height limitations were causing people trying to fit a bunch of stories into that height to kind of squash the first floor, and then you get these weird 8-foot ceiling heights as soon as you walk in off the street, or once you have like a 10-foot floor to floor, you're trying to shove mechanical and lighting into these spaces. And they ended up making a requirement that the first floor be a minimum of 14 feet high, just because people were trying to squash this building in because of the height requirement. So when they switched to stories, it kind of opened them up a little bit to creating nicer spaces versus trying to squish however many stories they could get into the height limitation. So has that been discussed?
Yeah, and so that's a part of what we wanted to talk to you all about. That's why I kind of went through the height map fairly quickly. But the overall discussion is, pros and cons versus measuring from stories versus feet. The information that you all give us today will definitely relay back to the department to kind of move forward from there. But we wanted to see, Peter, if you can actually go to the last slide, which is in that direction. We're looking at pros and cons, and I am aware that we were looking at the city of Charleston, and we did realize that they did just, I think now you have the option if you want to go height versus stories, and there is a minimum. They also defined a maximum, and I think that's one of the other concerns why I think our council shied away from staying completely by story. It's just that, will there be someone that pushes that envelope that says, well, we can do 3 stories. What about 20, feet per story, and then you're 60 feet? Or are you going to have that person that, or some crazy number there? So I think that was one of their concerns about that. But you can definitely, as City of Charleston did, where you define a minimum and a maximum. But we wanted to get your feedback on stories versus feet. So a couple of things, I just threw a couple of things onto the slide already. For stories, of course, the taller first floor, and variation in design, because I think that's one of the main pros. And then for on the other side of the argument, when measuring by feet, it's very clear. And I think that there's not much room for interpretation there. And so I guess if we can just, if each person wants to kind of comment and give any sort of feedback that you may have regarding this, that would be great.
Sure, I have a comment, Chris McCarthy. Okay. Peter, can you go back to that wedding cake diagram? So 10 feet per story is pretty tight.
Yeah.
Especially on the first floor. You're really looking at an 8-foot ceiling with mechanical and floor space, which is untenable.
Made by me, not for any sort of official purpose, but just to put that out.
Okay.
Yeah, Chris, this is Ian. I'm with you. I think these should all be proportions and not numbers. They should all be like number A and number B and C and all that stuff. And that would probably work a lot better.
Right. Another question. So in the era of COVID, there's going to be a lot more outdoor seating. Is there going to be a negotiable thing that if a person sets their building 20 feet from the property line back, will they get some sort of relief or a bonus? I think there should be some sort of a workaround. It allows for more creativity. And I think you're going to see, just as we're talking about the Georgetown property, that, we're all going to be looking for more outdoor space. I think the world's changed.
Okay.
Peter, Brittany, any thoughts on that? Anybody else?
Okay.
Yeah, well, within the Boulevard overlay, there is a requirement for an activity zone, which is in between the right-of-way and the face of the building. Mm-hmm. And that's specifically in the Boulevard overlay where that outdoor space and pedestrian activity is required to leave that space open. But outside of the boulevard overlay, I mean, we definitely have a 20 to 30 build to line, but no requirement for that kind of activity, which, you know, would be still be nice to incorporate that into our designs that we're commenting on.
This is Tara Spencer. So I'm going to go back to what I was kind of saying before as also my comment. I think the city of Charleston has done a really good job in their most recent revision of the height ordinances by making it stories, but also having that maximum height. Because just working at a firm that is downtown, I know that my office has been able to create a lot better spaces, especially with the first floor requirement being taller, as set by the city. Where before, I think if we needed parking on the first floor and the client wanted 4 stories of office space and we were in a 55 height limit, you know, that made these really, really tight spaces, versus like us being able to do 12 feet per floor or something that just gives more room so you can get, you know, 2 feet of mechanical and lighting before getting to like a 10-foot ceiling, which feels a lot better. So even if the town of Mount Pleasant switched to stories, they could define either a height limit for the building or a height limit per story. Like the maximum a story could be is 12 or 13 feet, you know, which would essentially limit, you know, how tall somebody could build per story, but it wouldn't force people to create these tight spaces that don't feel great. So I'm a proponent of having the stories with some kind of determination of the maximum.
Hey, this is Ian. I'm going to throw in one more idea. I think it was New York, but anyway, it was like the higher you go, the more open space you have to have. This was in the 60s. So no height limit. You can go to 3,000 feet. If you want to be 4 inches wide, then that's fine, right? And that worked itself out in New York.
Air rights. I don't think, Tara, I don't think you can create a maximum story height. I mean, if you want to put a performing arts center, you're going to want a 24-foot lobby. So there'd have to be a workaround. And the other thing is, you know, there's also an issue of mezzanines when you get into story heights.
This is Ian Duncan. I would say just, I think we're all in agreement, though, that a flat 55 is not where we're headed. Is that right? We are all sort of heading towards a dynamic system that allows creativity and variety?
Yeah, I think that's right, Ian.
Okay.
I think you have to have a maximum. I think that's the overall goal. But you know, what we've talked about, you don't want them to go in and have a squash down first story either. So that's almost like you need a minimum story height.
Yeah,
so
that's what I agree with that. I think you need a minimum.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe it's 9 feet or 10 feet.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the city of Charleston has done with their first floor requirement. They've made a minimum requirement of 12 feet, I think. It's either 12 or 14, I can't quite remember, but that's only for the first floor. And then they have a story requirement for the site. So they're indicating that the minimum amount that can be on the first floor. And I think that stems from what people were doing previously.
So this diagram is actually backwards. You've got the deeper, the higher stories on the upper portion, where you would more likely have a 13-foot lobby and a 10-foot penthouse.
Yes.
So I think it's a mistake to say that 30 feet is the maximum before the setback. I think it needs to be 36. Tara, Ian,
Yeah.
Or 3 floors, yeah.
or 3 floors?
Yeah. So
Um,
right now, the maximum, just to clarify, because I created a diagram so that you all could see the step back in a little bit more of a visual format. But yeah, the overall max height is 55. But if you go above 3 stories, and so just the 10 feet, I merely put that in there for mathematical purposes.
Okay, so it's not above
It's
30
not-
feet.
Yeah, it's not
No.
the
Stories.
It's just 3 stories, not 30 feet.
Okay.
Yes, 3 stories, not 30 feet.
Okay, so this is Ian. I want to go back to Rick's point. I thought he made a great point at the beginning. It was like, why do we want a height limit? It's to preserve coastal integrity and all that. But are we also, dooming Mount Pleasant to be a bedroom community forever if we don't allow any real development?
They'll change it in 10 years.
I'll be dead by then.
And does this include roof equipment?
Yeah, well, I mean, my point is I used to live in Seattle forever, and everybody started building in Bellevue across the river because they didn't want to deal with the bridge, they didn't want to deal with downtown, they don't want to deal with the parking, and now office space in Bellevue is 3 times the rent of downtown Seattle. So, I mean, what's the goal of Mount Pleasant? Are we going to be a bedroom community, or do we want, to actually get some action in here?
Well, I would say that there are zones. What happens outside the zone? Are there limits at all to the areas outside these specified zones?
You've got county zones that allow 80 feet.
Yeah, so if you go more towards the Charleston Harbor, is there a height limit there?
Yeah, I mean, what's the Jasper? The Jasper is like $120, right?
Yeah, it's up there. So anyway, this just specifies what goes on in these particular zones that are along major corridors.
Yes, this is specifically the Boulevard Overlay District.
So if you say you're on the other side of Mathis Ferry Road, could you build a 20-story building?
On the other side of Mathis Ferry? No, I think that is 45.
So there is a limit there too. It just
Yeah,
doesn't show
there
up
is
on
a
this
limit
map.
there too.
Okay.
Yes.
I think it's 35. Most
Probably is all residential over there, but I'm just asking, if this is really all encompassing or if you're just showing in these particular corridors what it is.
And this, Ian, I'll make one more point. None of the turquoise area, honestly addresses 17, right? There's no direct access. So that is not really a streetscape, in my opinion. That's a pass-through. Coleman's a different story. All the ancillary roads are a different story, but 17 has no direct access. So I don't really see an advantageous, I don't see you addressing that street the same way you address a normal street.
Question, does this include Shem Creek?
No, this specific section that we're identifying right here, there's a separate height map associated with Poland, but this is for just the Johnny Dodds Boulevard overlay and part of the waterfront Gateway District, which is the portion that's up by McGrath Darby.
All right, so Ian's going to go on the record and say hard height limits he's against. He would like to see some sort of ratio of height to open space and possibility of just a floor limit with a maximum floor height of maybe 18 feet per story or something, so they can do a ballroom if they want to. Nobody's going to build 4 ballrooms on top of one another. That's just not going to happen. And I think all these heights are actually pretty low. I mean, for the future of Mount Pleasant.
This is Tara Spencer. I'm also going to say that I don't think a height limit capping off is the best solution. Especially Chris mentioned before, mechanical equipment and elevator overruns. If those start to come into play, your building gets squashed even more. So Unless those particular items are exempt, I think going by stories and having some kind of maximum would be best. And then I'm a proponent of making a minimum height for the first floor so that you don't get an 8-foot ceiling height when you walk into a building.
Okay. And yeah, these are measured to the eaves, so we have different spaces. So it is from grade to eave.
But mechanical units and elevator shafts, overruns are excluded from the height calculation, correct? Because that's what the
Yes.
code currently says.
Yes.
I concur with generally what's been said regarding not setting a numerical value, but having it being based on stories. I also love the idea of creation of more open space and tying it to the buildings.
So what is the next step for us? Do we need to make some form of a motion, or are you just taking notes for?
No, I'm taking notes. Yeah.
Okay.
So it was basically a discussion. We're not trying to, reach a consensus, but it's more so taking your comments and taking it back internally. And as we move forward and identifying and researching these items, we want to make sure that we've, incorporated your feedback.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I would say,
And you
I would say that the 55 feet should be increased probably 6 or 7 feet and just incorporate rooftop equipment. Would probably be the cleanest way to do it.
I agree. You get so many low-pitched roofs down here to avoid this. I think we get a lot prettier buildings if we get rid of that.
So in other words, if we went with a story height limitation, would the roof would not count as a story, so a pitched roof could go beyond that?
Yeah,
I agree, but I mean, who wants to build an A-frame skyscraper around here? They're just not going to do it for money. I mean, we got to rely on these people to do the right thing that makes sense a little bit.
All right. Did anybody have any other final comment? Okay. Well, if not, we definitely.
Brittany, I'm sorry. Ian's going to throw in one more comment. I don't know if it's possible, but I do like the New York concept of height to plaza space relationship, especially for some of the bigger districts, because I do think building a wall of 60 feet building is a really bad idea. It kills all the breeze and walls off the connection to the water. Miami is an awful example of that.
Okay.
All right, so it sounds like we're nearing the end here, so we have to have a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second? I'll second it.
Is that
All right, so roll call vote.
Chris McCarthy.
Actually, we can just do it as a majority vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned.
Very good.
Thank you all.
Thanks, you guys.
Okay.
Good night.
does that include board comments?
That's right.